You'll never make it, Lisa. Be realistic for once. My dad's voice echoed through the kitchen, sharp like shattered glass. I stood there, frozen, hands gripping the edge of the table, my acceptance letter crinkled in my trembling fingers. I had just received an offer to study architecture at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. This was supposed to be my moment, the one I had dreamed of for years. But here was my dad, tearing it down, brick by brick, without a second thought. You always say that. I shot back, unable to keep the bitterness from seeping into my voice. Why can't you just be happy for me? I got in, Dad. This is what I've worked for. He sighed deeply, setting down the newspaper he had been pretending to read. His stern eyes met mine, and I could feel the weight of his disappointment pressing down on me. Architecture, Lisa? Really? You think you'll survive in that field? It's competitive, cutthroat. You've always been too sensitive, too impractical. We need to focus on your brother's future now. Of course. Evan. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong in my dad's eyes. He was 2 years younger than me but had already been groomed for greatness since the day he picked up a basketball. A sports scholarship was waiting for him, along with Dad's unwavering support and financial backing. I'm not Evan, I yelled, my voice shaking. I don't want to be him, Dad. I want to be me. Can't you see that? Lower your voice, young lady, he growled, rising to his feet. This is not about what you want. This is about what's practical for this family. Do you know how much tuition is for that school? We can't afford to waste money on a pipe dream. Waste money? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My chest felt tight, like I could barely breathe. I've worked so hard for this, and you're just going to throw it away? How can you say Evan's sports are worth paying for but my education isn't? Because Evan has a real future, Dad snapped, his face flushed with anger. He's going to get scholarships, he's going to go pro one day, and you know that. Your future is uncertain. I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. This was it, wasn't it? The truth I had always known but never wanted to face. In my dad's eyes, I was second best. No matter what I achieved, Evan's successes would always eclipse mine. Mom hovered by the stove, silent as usual, stirring a pot of soup that had long since gone cold. She looked up at me briefly, her eyes soft but full of helplessness, as if to say, you know how your father is. And she was right. Mom never interfered. She had resigned herself to playing the role of peacekeeper, avoiding confrontation at all costs. Fine, I said through gritted teeth, choking back tears. You don't want to help me? I'll figure it out on my own. Dad raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms over his chest. Good luck with that. Without our support, you're not getting far. You'll see that one day. I didn't say another word. I stormed out of the kitchen, my heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't about to stand there and let him destroy my dreams. I had worked too hard to get into that university, and I wasn't going to let him take it away from me just because Evan was his favorite. As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I thought about all the sacrifices I had made to get where I was. Late nights spent studying, weekends spent working part-time jobs, all in the hopes of getting into a top school. And now, it felt like none of it mattered. Dad would never support me like he did Evan. It had always been this way. Evan was the athlete, the future star, and I was. I didn't even know what I was in his eyes. A backup plan? A disappointment? I heard the faint sound of a basketball bouncing outside and knew Evan was practicing in the driveway, like he did every night. Dad would probably be out there soon, giving him pointers, telling him how proud he was. They had their own little world, one I had never been a part of. But as I lay there, something inside me shifted. I was done being the forgotten one, the second-place sibling. If Dad didn't believe in me, I would find someone who did. And if no one believed in me, I'd still prove them wrong. I picked up my phone and started searching for scholarships, grants, anything that could help me pay for school. It wasn't going to be easy, but I refused to give up on my dreams just because my dad couldn't see my potential. He had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. And I knew, deep down, that one day he'd regret it. Are you serious, Lisa? You're really going through with this? My best friend, Mia, asked as she shoved another fry into her mouth. We sat in the corner booth of a fast food joint, the one place I could afford to eat these days. I don't have a choice, do I? I replied, swirling my soda with a straw, the ice cubes clinking against the plastic. If I don't find a way to pay for school, it's over. I can't let that happen. Mia gave me a sympathetic look. It's not fair. Your dad should be helping you, especially after you worked so hard to get into that program. I let out a bitter laugh. Fair? My dad doesn't believe in fair. He believes in Evan. I hate that, Mia muttered, shaking her head. I've seen how much you've sacrificed. You deserve this, Lisa. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I did deserve this, didn't I? But the reality was, I was on my own now. The money I had saved from part-time jobs wasn't nearly enough to cover even the first semester's tuition, and the scholarships I applied for were a drop in the ocean compared to what I needed. I'm gonna find a way, I said, more to convince myself than Mia. I've been looking at more scholarships and grant opportunities. I'll work through college if I have to. Mia frowned. Work and study full-time? That's insane. You're going to burn yourself out. I don't have a choice, I sighed. If I don't do this now, I'll never get out of this house. I can't stay stuck here, Mia. I can't live my whole life in Evan's shadow. I get it, she said softly, her eyes full of concern. But promise me you won't destroy yourself in the process. I've seen people try to balance full-time work and school. It's brutal. I'll be fine, I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure if I believed it. I've come this far. I'm not backing down now. As I walked home later that evening, my mind raced with plans, possibilities, and worries. I had been accepted into the architecture program, but I was already struggling to keep up with tuition deadlines. I knew my dad wasn't bluffing. He had made it crystal clear that he wasn't going to contribute a single penny toward my education. It was all about Evan. Always had been. When I opened the front door, the familiar sound of a basketball bouncing echoed through the house. I grimaced. Sure enough, there was Evan, practicing his free throws in the driveway under Dad's watchful eye. Nice one, Ev. Dad cheered. That's the form I want to see. Keep that up, and you'll be unstoppable on the court. I rolled my eyes and walked past the window, refusing to let their little bonding session get under my skin. I went straight to my room, shutting the door behind me. I pulled out my laptop and opened up the endless tabs of scholarship applications I had been working on for weeks. One of them caught my eye, an essay contest with a hefty prize. The topic? Describe a challenge you have faced and how you overcame it. I stared at the screen, feeling the frustration bubble up inside me. What could I possibly write about that would capture everything I'd been through? The feeling of being overlooked, dismissed, and constantly compared to Evan. The weight of being told my dreams weren't worth supporting. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Maybe I could spin it. Maybe I could channel all that anger, all that frustration, into something that would win the scholarship. After all, wasn't my entire life one big challenge? I started typing furiously, the words flowing out like a flood. I wrote about growing up in the shadow of a golden child, about the sacrifices I made to pursue my passion for architecture. I wrote about the countless nights I stayed up studying, the rejection I felt when my own father refused to believe in me. I poured everything into that essay, every ounce of frustration, determination, and pain. By the time I was done, it was nearly midnight, and my eyes burned from staring at the screen for so long. I hit submit with a sense of finality, hoping this would be enough to make a difference. It had to be. The days turned into weeks, and I threw myself into whatever work I could find, babysitting gigs, freelance graphic design, anything that paid. I barely had time to sleep, let alone think about the future. The pressure was immense, but I kept pushing forward. I had no choice. One evening, after a long shift at the local cafe, I dragged myself home and collapsed onto my bed. My phone buzzed, and I groaned, expecting it to be another reminder about a bill or a job. But when I looked at the screen, my heart skipped a beat. It was an email from the scholarship committee. With shaky hands, I opened the message. Congratulations, Lisa. You've been selected as the winner of the $5,000 essay contest. I stared at the screen, hardly able to believe what I was reading. I had actually won. $5,000 wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a huge step in the right direction. It meant that I could keep going, at least for another semester. My chest swelled with pride. I had done this on my own. No help from Dad. No handouts. Just me, fighting for what I wanted. And this was only the beginning. As I sat there, basking in the small victory, I heard Dad's voice from the living room. He was laughing, probably at one of Evan's basketball highlights on TV. I clenched my fists, the old bitterness rising up inside me. He didn't believe in me now. But one day, he would. And when that day came, I wouldn't need his validation anymore. 4 years later, the smell of fresh coffee filled the small cafe as I sat at my usual corner table, laptop open, fingers tapping away at another project. I had managed to juggle school and work, barely surviving on the tightrope between exhaustion and ambition. But here I was, graduating in less than a month with my degree in architecture. And not just any degree. I was top of my class, with multiple job offers lined up. I had done it. Without Dad's help. Without anyone's approval but my own. Every late night, every part-time job, every scholarship, and grant, it had all led to this. I took a sip of my coffee, leaning back in my chair, finally allowing myself a moment of satisfaction. It had been a long road, but I had made it. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. Evan. I hadn't heard much from him over the past few years. While I was busy with my own struggles, he had gone off to college on his full-ride sports scholarship. But things hadn't exactly gone according to plan for the golden child. His sophomore year, he tore his ACL during a game, and just like that, his dreams of going pro were over. I'd felt bad for him at first, but not for long. After all, he still had Dad's unconditional support, while I had to claw my way through every obstacle alone. I hesitated before picking up the call. Hey, Evan. What's up? Lisa, you're not gonna believe this. His voice was frantic, out of breath, like he had been running. Dad needs your help. I blinked, taken aback. Dad? What are you talking about? He's in trouble, Evan stammered. Financial trouble. The company. It's going under. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Our father had always been proud of his small construction business, the one that had supported our family for as long as I could remember. He never talked much about it, but I knew things had been getting tight for a while. Still, I hadn't expected this. Dad was always so sure of himself, so certain that nothing could shake him. That he had it all under control. And why does he need my help? I asked, the edge in my voice sharper than I intended. Because. You're doing well now, aren't you? You're about to graduate, and you've got those job offers lined up. Dad knows you've been working in architecture. He was hoping. Hoping for what, Evan? I interrupted, unable to stop the sarcasm from spilling out. Hoping I'd swoop in and save the day? After years of telling me I'd never make it? After refusing to support me when I needed it most? There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear Evan wincing. I know, Lisa. I know things were messed up between you and Dad, but. Messed up? I scoffed. Dad crushed every dream I ever had. He poured everything into you while telling me I wasn't good enough. And now that you can't help him, he suddenly remembers I exist? I get it, okay? Evan snapped, frustration creeping into his voice. I know Dad was unfair to you. But he's still our father. He's desperate. He didn't want to ask you, but he doesn't have anyone else to turn to. The words hung in the air, twisting in my mind. Desperate. Dad, desperate. It was almost impossible to imagine. The man who had always seemed invincible, who had never bent for anyone, now needed me. The daughter he had dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated. A part of me wanted to hang up the phone. To let him feel the weight of his choices. The bitterness I had carried all these years burned hot in my chest, tempting me to walk away and leave him to his fate. After all, wasn't this the justice I had craved for so long? The ultimate revenge? He had refused to invest in my future, and now here I was, in a position to succeed without him. Meanwhile, he was the one on the brink of losing everything. But then another thought crept in, a thought I hadn't expected. Maybe it wasn't about revenge anymore. Maybe it was about showing him that I had won, not by tearing him down, but by proving I could rise above the smallness of his vision for me. "Where's Dad now?" I asked, my voice calmer than before. "He's at home," Evan said quickly, sensing a shift in my tone. "I'm here too. Can you come over?" I exhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the decision in front of me. "I'll be there in an hour." When I pulled up to the house, it looked the same as it always had: the driveway where Evan and Dad used to bond over basketball, the front lawn that Dad had meticulously kept pristine. But something felt different. The air was heavier, tinged with a sense of defeat that hadn't been there before. I knocked, and Evan opened the door, giving me a tight, relieved smile. "Thanks for coming." I stepped inside, and there he was, Dad, sitting at the kitchen table, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked older than I remembered, the lines in his face deeper, his once confident posture now hunched. "Lisa," he said, his voice low, almost defeated. "I didn't think you'd come." I stood there for a moment, staring at the man who had shaped so much of my life, both the good and the bad. There was a time when I would have given anything for his approval, for his belief in me. But now, standing in front of him, I realized I didn't need it anymore. "I'm here," I replied simply, pulling up a chair across from him. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I know I've made mistakes, Lisa. With you. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I'm in over my head here. The company is failing. And Evan told me. He told me you've been doing well. I'm not asking for a handout, but I need advice. You've been in this industry now. You understand things I never did. And I could use your help." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. I could hear the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability that had never been there before. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze for the first time. "I'll help you. But not for your sake. For mine." Dad nodded slowly, understanding. He didn't say another word. And in that silence, I realized something. I had won, not by getting revenge, but by becoming everything he said I couldn't be. I had built my own future, and now I was stronger than his doubts, his favoritism, and his dismissal. In the end, I didn't need his approval. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.